Hi, I'm Brandy with the Springs Preserve, and I'd like to talk about irrigation for edible beds. I know irrigation can seem like a daunting task, but I'm going to go through the steps to walk you through what you need to know and the basics of how to do it. Water is a key component to any edible garden and should be given time and thought to plan it out well. Installing an irrigation system requires some work and cost up front, but once it's installed, it requires minimal routine maintenance. You want to aim to water deeply and infrequently unless you're germinating seed. When you're germinating seed, the soil cannot dry out, so that top layer has to stay moist, so bear that in mind. The frequency differs throughout the seasons, and with the soil heating up in the summer, it's going to require a lot more water than it will in the cooler months. The goal for all plants is to encourage deep roots to grow well below the top layers of soil. This is where moisture remains, and in the winter it's a little warmer, in the summer it's a little cooler, so it causes a lot less stress to plants. In general, the depth for watering vegetable beds and perennials is at least 1 foot. For shrubs it's 2 feet, and for trees it's a minimum of 3 feet. For containers, you always want to water the entire surface area evenly and make sure you water enough for water to drain out those drainage holes. This prevents inadequate watering from happening, which can cause some salt buildup. And that happens because we have high salts in our water, in some soils, and in some fertilizers. So the goal again is to flush water through the entire root zone at every watering. Your soil might look dry, but if you put your finger or a chopstick or an untreated piece of wood down into the soil for a few minutes, check out where the moisture is. It could be wet just a few inches below the soil level, and if you're not germinating seeds, that could be adequate for another day or two. For types of irrigation, you have a few options. You can hand water, tie into an existing hose spigot, add to an existing irrigation system, or build an entire new one. Drip irrigation is an easy and effective way to conserve water. Hand watering is not the most efficient way to water. It takes a long time to saturate the soil, and it shows an uneven soil that the water will just go to low points, so make sure that you've leveled that soil out if you're hand watering or using drip irrigation. You're typically going to be hand watering during the day, so you end up losing a lot of water to evapotranspiration, which is when it evaporates back into the atmosphere. And in the warmer months, you might be committing to watering daily. So you need to prepare for this if you're not going to be around. In schools, weekends might be too long to go in the warm months without water. So unless you have well-established plants and you've encouraged those deep roots, you might want to stick to just watering throughout the weekends with an irrigation system. And when you're planting, stick to planting on maybe Mondays or Tuesdays. That gives you the first few days of the week to really get those plants acclimated to their new environment. If your school's closed in summer, if you leave for vacations, think about how you will need to get these plants watered in your absence. You may need to tie into an existing irrigation system, build one, or find someone to water in your absence, or you can always leave beds fallow or empty when you're going to be gone. Adding to existing irrigation systems or building new ones, first you have to identify where the underground infrastructure is. So several days before you plan on needing this, you can call Before You Dig at 811. It's a free service that comes to your property and marks underground utilities including water, power, sewer, and gas. Remember that contractors or property owners are responsible for repair fees, so just call to avoid potential mishaps and keep yourself safe from harm. Once you've located utilities, you can work around them and add to the existing infrastructure. So decide where to tap into the water and power, but if you're uncomfortable doing plumbing or electrical work, you can always hire someone for this portion of the job. Battery-powered timers can be used. You can attach these right to a hose. They don't last long in the heat of the Southwest, and I've had to replace mine as frequently as twice a year, but they require no special skills and no wiring. From your valve, think about how you're going to get water to an edible bed. So you can map this out, but some people use PVC, especially if you're traveling a long distance between the valve and the garden bed. You can also use poly pipe. This is flexible, it's easy to work with, but both of these are plastic, and so they're going to break down in the cold winters or in the heat of summer, so you want to make sure they're buried. Mulch is an easy way to cover these lines in edible beds, or you can always just dig them down a few inches. It's really critical to make sure you know local codes and regulations. You'll likely be tying into existing water sources, so you'll need a backflow preventer. Your setup like this will be your backflow preventer, valve, filter, pressure regulator, and then your irrigation lines. All of that is then going to go into a valve box with a lid and be basically level with the ground. when you're doing any maintenance or repair, instead of working in the ground, we just add these quick disconnect unions so you can pop the whole assembly out, do any maintenance work you need, and pop it back in without being on your hands and knees or lying on the ground. If you have an existing irrigation system, you can often just add another valve. Make sure that your timer clock has adequate room for another valve to be added, because you'll need a valve specific to your vegetable beds. Sometimes you're watering these daily, so they can't be added to an existing line like a tree line or a shrub line. Those plants all need their own individual valves with different durations and frequencies. So for example, if you have trees, shrubs, succulents, and an edible bed, you need 4 valves to water properly on an irrigation system. You can always test for your water pressure, and this can help you determine the distance you can travel and how many and what size emitters you can use in each line. If you don't have adequate water pressure, plants at the end of the line can suffer from insufficient water. If you're using a drip irrigation system, it's important to know that distribution tubing or poly pipe comes in different size diameters. So make sure that your fittings are suitable for what you've purchased. You can really kind of negate the need to worry about this if you stick with the same brand fittings and pipe, but just be aware that those sizes are often indicated as OD or ID sizes, which indicate inside diameter and outside diameter. But again, sticking with the same products helps ensure that those fittings will work well together. Poly systems are very easy to modify and repair. If you have some trouble getting the fittings on, you can always just soak the ends of plastic into hot water. I'll bring a hot thermos out with me, leave it in there. It makes them a little more pliable. What you don't want to do is take a fitting and then rotate it to fit it on. It actually just needs to be rocked back and forth. By rotating or spinning it, you can actually mar the surface of the plastic, and that can cause some leaks over time. So if you just rock it back and forth, that can help. Also bear in mind there are different types of fittings. There will be compression fittings, barbed fittings. Some are a little easier to get on than others, but again, heating up the plastic can really help with some of that. Compression is a little harder to work with, but it tends to hold up better over time. I find it very useful to have a shutoff valve, especially if you have multiple lines. So you can have the shutoff valve tied onto a PVC line, you can have a small one tied into your poly line, and this is very useful if you have multiple lines that you've tied into. You can close one bed off at a time or one section off at a time, so you don't have to run water throughout all of the beds if you're not using them. If you put one at the end, you can use this or just a flush end cap to blow debris off the end of the line whenever you've performed any maintenance or changes. And this is a good habit to get into because it's very surprising doing this seasonally how much debris can build up in those lines. That keeps your emitters from getting clogged up. Once you have your supply line in place, you can put in your smaller microtubing or spaghetti line. And this is actually what gets the water to the plants. You want to keep the supply line clean. So I always bring a rag or I use my sleeve and wipe it down before I insert anything into it. If you're using a barb, you would put the barbed fitting in and then extend with your microtubing from there. Or if you're using emitters that are inline, you would put the inline emitter here, extending your tubing from there. Your emitters are actually what control how much water is going to each plant. So there's a couple different sizes and types that you can use. But if you do make a mistake, they make something called a goof plug if you goof up, and they're 2 sizes, and they just are inserted into your fitting or into the hole you've made to cap that up. You can also use these goof plugs at the end of a line. If, for instance, you didn't want to use this line to a plant for a season, you can just put that goof plug there and then cut it off the next time you need to use it. That can only work if you have an inline emitter. So let's talk about different types of emitters. We have inline emitters and end-of-line emitters. So I already talked about the inline emitters. These go between your supply line and your microtubing. End-of-line go at the end of the microtubing. Couple differences here. I find that it's easier to keep the whole system cleaner if you insert the inline emitters here. Everything then that's rolling around near your plants and in the soil, it just is blown out every time that you water. Now these are often exposed. They're in the sun, they're right by your plants, and they can break off, they can blow off over time. Once these blow off, you're going to have a steady stream of water flowing because there's no control for how much water is going to your plants. The other thing I like about these inline emitters is they can easily be moved around. So I have my water control here. I can extend this with a barb if I need to make this longer. I can cut it back if I need to make it shorter. So it's very easy to modify. There are also a couple things that you can do instead of just using these emitters. There are inline soaker hoses where there are emitters throughout and spaced throughout the soaker hose. And these come in different intervals, 6-inch, 12-inch, 18-inch. I find that 6-inch is generally best to give adequate watering in edible beds. There's another brand called Netafim that has emitters inline in different frequencies as well. And so these will be made into a grid. They can be flexible and moved around. They're a lot harder to modify if you need to do that. So just bear that in mind. Poly systems I find are the easiest to adjust and modify if needed. So emitters also differ in how many gallons of water they release per hour. So you'll see it's GPH. They're often color-coded and they sometimes have a very small print listing what they are releasing. They are directional, so you need to make sure that you are putting them in line the right way. There's often an arrow indicating flow, or you can look on the packaging or brand-specific information online. So again, I prefer these inline emitters versus end-of-line emitters. It seems to cause me a lot less problems in my system. Spray ends are something that a lot of people use as well. Now these can release a lot more water than some of these smaller emitters, but they're adjustable. You can find them to be a 360-degree spray, corners, 45-degree angle, and they are adjustable in some cases. So just bear in mind that those can be nice to give coverage, but you lose a lot of moisture to the air and wind evaporation, especially in our windy conditions in the Southwest. If you have animals, these end-of-line emitters can be nibbled off for animals to get sources of water. And to put these in, any barbs or any inline emitters, they make a lot of different punches. And it basically just makes a hole into your supply line, allowing for easier insertion again of the barb or the inline emitters. Irrigation supply stores will have everything you need. Some other stores might be limited in some of the products that they offer. Plants' water needs change with the weather, and local restrictions can help you determine when you should change your programming. When you make a seasonal adjustment, it's also a great time to perform some of the routine maintenance you need on valves, emitters, and to just check for leaks. These emitters can clog over time, so it's really good just to run the system, make sure that the wetting patterns are adequate, that the root zones are getting all the water that they need, and that nothing is clogged or has stopped running. Test this by running your system for the scheduled amount of time on an irrigation clock, and then dig down and make sure that the depth of the wet soil is sufficient. Again, you can use a chopstick or a wooden stake to check that, or just dig a little hole. You can then increase or decrease your run times accordingly, but do bear in mind that you can conserve a lot of water by adjusting these plant needs seasonally. Run your valve through the irrigation timer, or you can run it manually. Just make sure that if you run it manually, you turn it back off after you're done testing. Valves can sometimes stick on, and this is what controls when and how much water is going to each line. So they have a little part called a diaphragm inside, and even the smallest amount of debris can wedge this open, and that keeps the system running incessantly, so you can end up with leaks. This is something that goes bad pretty frequently. They're very easy to change with some systems, some a little more challenging. These kits are inexpensive. You can buy them wherever you buy your valves. They're specific to the brand of valve that you have, so be mindful of that. When you take it off, just know that often there are springs and tiny O-rings. You want to make sure you don't lose those parts and that you put them back just as you found them. Before you do any valve maintenance, it's important just to turn the water off first. Again, unions can make this job easier by popping the whole section out, working above ground, putting it back in, and then turning the system back on. There are many types of timers available with different capabilities. Make sure that your timer will work well with your needs. It should be programmed each different season, decreasing the frequency of watering during the cooler months. Think about the placement of timers. They have both indoor and outdoor timers. If you place one in a garage, a homeowner is the only one who can access it. If it's in a schoolyard or a public area, put it somewhere where it can't be easily messed with, or lock it. After many years, they'll eventually fail and need to be replaced, so if you've inherited an old one, that could be the problem if you're having issues. The inexpensive battery-powered timers in exposed locations may fail very frequently, but you'll need to check regularly that they're functioning and replace the batteries as necessary. If your beds are too dry or too wet, you might need to adjust or perform some maintenance on the frequency of those plants being watered. Timers are very similar in that you set the time and date, and they control the frequency and duration of water. There are both indoor and outdoor models again, so just be mindful of that. And different timers can run a different number of valves or zones. So this is something important to think about. Most smaller properties, these are considered stations, and they're generally going to correspond to one valve or zone. So on a timer, a station is going to be the same as one valve or zone. For example, if you have, again, trees, shrubs, succulents, and edibles, you're going to have 4 valves, so you'll have 4 stations or 4 zones. A program on a timer will determine the frequency and duration, and it's specific to each valve. Again, so your tree program is going to run maybe once a month for 2 hours. Edible plant zone might run 3 times a week for 7 minutes, so they have to be specific to each of those valves. Some timers have multiple start times per program, which is an important factor if you're buying a new one and you're growing things from seed. You might need to have things water very briefly, but more than once a day. The start time tells you when the program is going to start to water, and the run time is going to indicate how long the program actually waters. Most timers have a manual station run time, and this is great to test your system or run if your beds are dry. Also, many have a rain shutoff, which can be used if you've gotten a lot of water. You can refer to your instructions or find them online if you need any details specific to your timer. To keep your irrigation system running smoothly, there's a few things you can do seasonally. First, change your clocks as the weather changes. Remember, those plants don't need as much water when the temperatures are cooler. Flush your irrigation system to ensure water saturates the entire root zone, and make sure that it's watered well. Check for leaks and clogged emitters by running the system for the program time, and make sure everything is watered to the right width and depth. Otherwise, you can change those times as needed. Open the end caps or the flush ends that allows you to blow out debris, preventing clogged emitters. If you're using battery-powered timers, it's also probably a good idea to change the batteries. After you've taken time to decide the best options for irrigating your garden, it's time to get started. Many plant challenges are linked to watering. Irrigation is such a vital part of the garden, it deserves careful planning and preparation. The health of your plants depend on it.